qualified twice. They are currently on the cusp on 64th out of the 64 places that will get into day number 2. So I absolutely love to see them play. This is the first time I'm going to get to see them personally. So very excited as we're going to get a face for the turtle.
That is terrifying. I love it. Thank you. Coming in onto the board of Anaconda, who we have not really seen a lot of here in competitive on screen, but I do want to go over some of the players that are going to be familiar to our audience. Solo Gasong is one of them for me, of course, coming out of the German scene. Megs will know him well, and I know him from coming into Galaxy's finals. Big reroll player, came in, played the same composition every single game, did surprisingly well with that in mind, and I'm happy to see him coming back here in a Golden Spatula Cup.
Yeah, and of course, we've seen it, we call it the Barry Baton effect of if you're very well known for a certain style of play, you can force off at least the players who know about you away from that kind of style, further enhancing your ability to one-trick your approach to the game.
Wonder if he's going to be doing that this time. I suspect not, because recent times when I've checked up on him, just out of curiosity, because I love all our reroll players, he was going for a little bit more varied of a composition. Now, on Anaconda, not stuck to any composition yet, not found anything that gives a ton of direction in this early game. Probably waiting until next round when we get our first augments of the game.
So something I wanted to bring up in the early game, which we didn't get into detail last time, is we saw multiple players going for Astral early on. Of course, eventually we saw Volta pulling out the entirely Astral board. I do wonder if we might be seeing people making very brief stops at the Astral shop to grab themselves, you know, a little bit of extra gold in the early game, and then throwing it in the bin and saying, if I can't find the 2-star versions of these, I'm not going to bother. Oh my gosh, Liberia, my Christmas wish came true.
All right, it's going to be an Assassin Crown already coming out here for Anaconda, knowing that they have that Dark Flight on the board. Get the Rengar, get the Hand of Justice, get the Assassin Emblem. We are popping off, because that's going to get the Dark Flight Emblem. That is a hell of a start, I'm going to say.
I mean, this is perfect. So you're getting full value. Double Trouble, that's another really fascinating one as well, which I hope we get to see Solo Gasang go for. If you're going to go for rerolls, then you couldn't ask for more.
Yeah. I think Double Trouble is dangerous, though, because in my opinion, the best Double Trouble composition right now is Dark Flight. You don't want to contest that. Instead, it's going to be Blue Battery 3, so this is 100% going to be an AP-based composition.
Yeah, I mean, we're expecting this to be a truly ludicrous zone board, because now you just don't need to...
Peter! That's an Ezreal 3 on Skew's board.
Well, you'll notice that it's an Ezreal 3, but there's also the loaded dice. So, 2 of those loaded dice have been put in to get Skew G3.
How does he have an Ezreal 3 and 1 loaded dice left?
I guess they must. So they must have found an enormous amount of Ezreals to start off with, and then just only needed a couple of more rolls to get it. It's honestly fascinating. I don't think I've seen anybody ever do this.
Yeah, okay. I'm just trying to process here. Of course, we haven't seen Ezreal reroll since 7.5 came out previously. You would see this with the Jade composition, but since the changes to Jade, since the loss of Taric, you've only really seen the Karma version, and that's only been cropping up recently. So I'm wondering where this composition is going to head in the later stages of the game, because I'm not confident that Ezreal 3 can be a consistent carry as we go later on. But apparently, Skew has other ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly amazed to see this. We've taken a quick look across the other augments. I believe there were a few different ones, including a level up in there, as we will check out what Anaconda's board looks like in practice. So this board will be getting a lot stronger as we go. The more Darkflight units, the more Darkflight essences you have, but you do get raw stats from each one, as Ezreal 3 proves to be just a tiny bit too strong for Rengar 1.
Just a smidgen of health left remaining, and this is kind of why I was concerned about this board. Ezreal's cool and all, but he is not exactly a defensive powerhouse either. Should be enough to keep him win streaking for a little while, is the hope, I assume, here from Skew, but hasn't invested so much into it that it's the end of the world if it's not. It's just a good amount of power for the earlier stages.
I mean, we did see in a previous game, even the 2-star edge roll with the AP itemization can do very well. So 3-star presumably is intended to carry Skew G3 all the way through stage 2, maybe stage 3, maybe even stage 4 if they can get the items for them. And then eventually transition into, well, I presume it's just going to be Sohm again.
Well, and the alternative is I have seen a couple of 4 Swift Shot compositions. Volta was playing it on the ladder a couple of games yesterday, and obviously that is going to trend much further towards a Xayah carry, but if you're in this positive position, drop the AP items on Ezreal, AD items on Xayah, I think that's a potential option. I'm just not sure about the viability. So I'm interested in seeing that as we go forward, coming into the later stages of the game. I want to check back in around stage 4. See how things are going at that point.
Yeah, I think these rounds are going to look very similar for Skew G3 for a while. So let's check in with Marks here. So they've gone for the on drop, I believe the Living Forge, which will drop in once every 10 rounds, if I remember correctly. So they'll be seeing a whole lot of on items. It's just going to take a while before it really pays off.
Yeah, I, of course, remember our infamous game where we had 3 Zhonya's Paradoxes come out of that. That can no longer happen, everyone, just in case you're hoping for another one. Every item is guaranteed to be unique. It is one of those augments that is not going to give you a ton of combat power immediately compared to other prismatics, but as we get into the later stages, once you get to around that stage 6 mark, you're going to have a lot more power than most of the other prismatic augments can provide. So I'm going to be really looking forward to seeing how that makes it to the late game, and in fact, if it makes it to the late game.
We have got Preparation, which of course is definitely one of the more generic ones, if you can find a way to get enough of the stuff out early on. Interesting setup here for Mug Squared, though. They've got a good variety. A little bit of Jade. We have got a Rengar lurking on the side, which seems to be a bold choice considering what we saw starting off here for Anaconda.
Yeah, I feel like given that scouting, there's no way that Mug is not scouting the board. You see that, I'm not sure you're ever going to want to go for that Rengar reroll. So where do you go from here? It doesn't seem like they have an idea just yet, and that is going to bite them in the later rounds if they don't figure it out soon. You want as much time to prep that carry as possible.
As we check in with Skew G3 again, one thing that does concern me is Skew may actually be a victim of their own success here because they're not going to be able to get access to Carousel to get those items they need to enable this Ezreal to be the strongest they can be. I mean, of course, we've got the Krugs coming up and maybe they'll get a good drop from there, but if they don't, this Ezreal is static at their power level for quite a while.
And this is something that I've been discussing multiple times across set 7. There aren't any builds that can be carried by just defensive items. That's by design. And I think that's good, because if you could just tank your way through, we'd have another Mystic Vanguard's meta on our hand. The closest you get is Terra, but you do need offensive items in order to make it past like stage 4. You can kind of tank through, but we saw with Volta's board the weaknesses of compositions that can only really deal chip damage. You can only stall for so long, but as the game gets later, you get those damage sources that do burst, and I'm concerned without Carousel priority where they're going to end up.
So we've got Marks and Skew G3 both undefeated so far. Zelendario, of course, my dark horse pick coming out from the open qualifier, winning out day 2 and then going barely through every other day. Currently, I believe one of our lowest ranked players or lowest performing players in this particular lobby certainly needs to show up impressively. Otherwise, they'll dip below that line and may not make day 2 at all.
Looks like they're going to be on a great start for that, stopping Marks' win streak. So nobody going to be 100 streaking into the Krugs, but I believe Mug Squared is 100% lost streaking into Krugs, which is going to be great for their economy, but not great for their health.
No, at least they're getting paid off with the preparation, with what they're doing. The only problem is that, of course, if any units that you don't have on your bench right now are going to take a while to prep going forward. So if you can't make your board significantly stronger with the stuff you're putting from your bench to the field right now, you're going to continue to take losses, and these may be losses you can't afford to take.
Wukong? Hello? He's,
just
all right, there he goes. He's just hanging out. He's stuck hanging out with his friends, giving moral support. Now he's coming back out. I do wonder if given the units on board right now and on bench, if this is going to be the first Bonky Kong we've seen in ages, I don't think the composition is that strong, but I'm not seeing what other angles Mug could go for, given that they're not heading towards, it seems, re-rolling the Nidalee yet.
We have got, with an enormous amount of Brawler's gloves on the bench, we have got the chance to put together El Clasico of the Infinity Edge and the Last Whisper, I suppose, as well, if he wanted to. But yeah, I think I'm with you here. Look, for Mug, they don't seem to have an obvious path forward from here. They've at least got a lot of money in the bank, but again, they're going to need to spend some time to get any kind of late game carry online, which is where preparation does fall down.
Yeah, money is only as useful as what you can buy with it, and so far, Mug has not bought anything that gives them time. And that's what they're going to need if they're coming back into this one. Rubik on the other side is going to have this massive Diana stacking up with some AP and the Ginsu's Rage Blade, which should guarantee their win here off the back of the Diana and the Zippy.
Yeah, Rubik, level up. If we go back to our previous set, level up was absolutely everything because the late game Aoshin boards were just, were enough to beat everything. You could kind of argue for saying we're kind of in the same spot here again, where late game Dragon boards are absolutely amazing. It's just that maybe the boards before that point are too strong to let you get there every single time.
There's a choice to be made here, and I'm just not gonna. Okay. Second win. They're not going to go. I was really hoping, Peter. I was just sitting there and I'm like, if you're crazy enough, if you're enough of a madman, you hit that recombobulator button. Will it throw your game? 100% of the time. Will it be cool as hell? You betcha.
Well, we're talking about this for Mug Squared. They don't really have a board that's really going to take them that far. Recombobulating that board, you've then got a whole board where probably something in there is worth using.
Might actually be useful, yeah.
Yeah, and they're all prepped already. I presume that the preparation stacks will stay in place across the recombobulator units, so I don't know, I suppose it's not going to happen this lobby anyway, so Mug Squared will have to stay at the very bottom. Mark's up at the top, as you said, no one is undefeated, but Rubik, they've got themselves a good setup. They've got the best friends to make their board a little bit more directly strong, but they are relying on that level up at level 7 right now. They just keep a lot of bodies on the board, and that's where their power lies.
Yeah, but not a lot of damage. That's the thing. The Zippy is just rank 1. We talked on a previous cast today about how strong Zippy 2 is, and consequently, how absolutely useless Zippy 1 is. Not a lot of damage, not a lot of shielding, not going to do a whole lot here for Rubik. But I do kind of want to circle back onto the level up point because I think it's going to be relevant for the rest of this game. We don't have anyone really pulling ahead in economy, but in 7.5, even though we're going to have a prismatic lobby, which generally speeds them up, we've seen a lot more people able to be going level 9. The pace of experience in these games has been a lot slower, allowing for slower play, allowing for those capped out boards more frequently. And I think level up is going to give value because you can get that edge by going level 10. It's no longer about rushing 9 and kind of forgetting the level 10 aspect. That's a 5 dragon board now. Whereas before that would have been a 1 dragon board plus whatever you can fit in.
We'll see how Rubik does longer term, as we've got two very similar looking boards up against each other. We have got the grab there onto the Wukong, of course. He's got the Edge of Night to keep him up and healthy. Both of these boards actually focusing more on their kind of front line, and in the Gluteus Maximus's case, spreading their items around to get the cybernetic shell. They're both very, very solid boards, but Gluteus has been taking a hammering in the early going. They really need this win.
Yeah, we haven't talked about them much so far, but former EMEA champion, one of our world's representatives, an incredibly strong player, but on and off in competitive, and I'm hoping this can be their renaissance. I'm hoping they can use this opportunity to once more make it to the EMEA finals. Barely losing out. The burn not quite enough to take down that Karma. So Gluteus taking another massive hit down there to just 50 HP.
I love TFT Marks' expression there. Wasn't quite sure how that one was going to go either. Notable, we don't have any spatulas on this carousel. Gluteus and Mug Squared are two players at the bottom. Both have got spatulas ready to go, so they should be able to put them together with the component they've been waiting for.
Now we're going to be seeing Skew. We were talking about how problematic it might be that there's nothing on the carousel for them, and then suddenly 4 offensive components are left on the carousel by the time the first place player gets to go in. So again, not too proud to admit that I was wrong. but what a weird carousel, frankly. You'd really expect 2 PF swords to have been picked up by the time the entire carousel is sent. But clearly a very different game going on as we see that Rengar 2 on the board here for Mug. Rolling over the Terra. Not going to be finding a whole lot of value coming out here just yet.
Wow.
Okay. I like that.
Well, we thought Mug might be sort of positioning to try and move into the Rengar space, but didn't necessarily think it was going to happen up against Dario. We noticed before, of course, they've got the very, very strong Xiao Yu, who's going to be able to do a decent amount of punching with the time being created by that Jax. The Dark Flight, though, it's going to be, even with it being this late coming in, it's still a strong board.
Yeah, massive damage coming out of that Rengar. Not quite enough to deal with the Xiao Yu, and I think that might spell the end of this Dark Flight board, because this Xiao Yu is still massive. Even though it's a Xiao Yu 1, Dario has really been banking on that power to go all the way through stage 3 and save HP as much as possible. And it seems like that strategy is still going to pay off as they maintain over 50 gold of economy.
When we think back to the previous set and what we would see Xiao Yu be doing generally against the Siphon, with the kind of board we've got here for Mug Squared, you ideally want to have Rengar by themselves at the end with all of the buffs they've been getting from the Dark Flight units. And Xiao Yu is amazing at dealing with single units towards the end of the round.
Yeah, the damage reduction plus the fact that her ultimate gives so much damage on her auto attacks. If she only has to deal with 1 unit, she's pretty happy. The AoE is small. You're not going to catch the carry that way often with just the AoE, but you get a 1v1. She's going to win that most of the time.
Up against Galutius Maximus now. Of course, one thing we are seeing with with the Dark Flight kind of coming back to the forefront a little bit more is we are we're living in environments where you can't be relying on your backline remaining safe for any amount of time.
Yeah. And I think it makes the front line all the more important. It makes secondary carries more important because those primary carries often going to have low armor. But you have secondary carries who build things like Titan's Resolve, will get targeted much slower by that Rengar and can build up damage by the later stages of the round. Or things like Jace, Shyvana, other tankier options that can still beat damage threats.
All right, so as we come to the end of stage 3, let's take stock of where we are. So Mug Squared down at 20 HP, certainly in a perilous position with very little gold to work with as well. Though they have got a pretty ludicrous losing streak, I think they're going to want to change that. Up at the top, Anaconda on the winning streak with Scrug above them, because I believe picking up Tiny Titans before to propel their HP forward.
Yeah, and we're looking here why we were saying that we don't think Mug should be going for that Rengar, even though they found the preparation, even though they had a Rengar early. Anaconda is having much more success in the game as a whole, and as a result doesn't need to rely on the Rengar as much. They've got the augment they need. They've got the emblem to spread across. They've found a Swain. They can afford to wait. They can afford to lose. Mug cannot.
This just gives us a chance, actually, because I know it was being asked in the chat before, just to kind of go through and explain what the Essence is doing here. So it's an item which will get shared to all of your Dark Flight units, but and when that unit dies with the Essence in its inventory, you spread a bunch of base stats around, including defensive stats, aggressive stats, and things as well. The non-obvious part about this is that you don't need to have the Dark Flight Essence in your inventory to benefit from it. You just need to be a Dark Flight unit. So Swain and Rengar can potentially both be built up with 3 items each, and then also get the benefit of all the Essence from the rest of the squad.
Yeah, and this is why you'll see, especially with the Dark Flight Essence, you'll see people just running spare copies of the Dark Flight units. That's why Double Trouble is really good for this composition as well. Probably not going to see that unless Annie gets really lucky with the final augment of the game, which is coming up in just 1 second.
All right, what do we got? Nope, not going to happen.
Knife Edge would be really good, though. So would Scoped Weapons. Will be Knife Edge. All right.
This is pretty good, because we haven't even talked about it
it's really
yet.
good.
I mean, yeah, we've got as not just, of course, the Rengar and Swain part of the connection here. We've got the 4 assassin part as well. Neela being able to be added into the composition as yet another carry, and we've even got items for her, to be able to put an Infinity Edge on her as well. You've got so many different threats here from the Dark Flight comp that it's not vulnerable to just having 1 unit eliminated early and then falling over.
Damn. Now, Mug Squared still at the bottom of the board. I'm keeping my eye out there. And I am wondering how both they and Skew are going to go, but let's check out Mug first. Just got a Forge and only got the Zonius Paradox off them. I don't think this is going to help them that much. And conveniently, we also get to see Skew's board, which frankly has not changed much over the last couple of rounds. Just added a BT to the Ezreal.
This is exactly what we thought was going to happen, which is that you don't have the ability to get good items for the Ezreal, so you just have to take what you can get. Does survive for a second, being jumped on by the Rengar, but I think we are going to see Squad, trying to move on to something else. They've got enough HP to be able to do this, so they've got time. But with Mug and I think our lower place players right now starting to get a little bit more desperate, they're going to start spending all their money to make their boards as strong as possible, and that will start to strip a little bit of HP out of our top of the table players.
Speaking of money, Skew's got nothing. Look at that, only 10 economy. And you've had this massive win streak, you've had this Ezreal 3, you've had so much time to build up that economy and still haven't found anything once you've rolled down with it. That is a really rough situation to be stuck in, and I don't think Skew's game is going to go very well. Meanwhile, on the side of Solo Gasang, we just saw a Soam with Infinity Edge, Jeweled Gauntlet, and a Gunblade, plus Blue Battery 3. If Solo Gasang can survive long enough, 68 HP, 6 win streak, this board is probably going to win the game.
I mean, it's pretty friggin' terrifying. Mug Squared, I think, is going to be feeling pretty bad about this. I mean, they've got a decent setup, does Mug Squared, to try and get through, but I think it was Panda who was noting it before, that a lot of time we're seeing these backlines kind of not getting too much approach. Of course, Rengar will bypass the front lines and be one of the few units that can do it, but I think once that Soam hits 2-star, then there'll be very few comps that can stand against him.
That is the asterisk behind this composition, though. Luckily, Solo Gasang has plenty of health to work with. Now that they've lost around, their economy is kind of in the tank, but they have time. He has the opportunity to hit that 2-star. There is always the chance that he doesn't. And that would be a moment where I, as a Solo Gasang enjoyer, would absolutely cry. But I think things are looking up for him for the rest, as far as the rest of this game goes.
So we see an enormous amount of Brawler's gloves currently being underutilized. I think our players are looking for things exactly like the tier here, where they can just, use those gloves, get them up and active. We do see it from Zelendario, TFT Marks, and Gluteus. They've all got, some combination of a, Infinity Edge or the Dual Gauntlet going in. So I think we're going to start to see our boards getting really, really capped out here and become hyper dangerous.
Yeah. You can see Solo Gasang is just digging for this Soam. Not able to find it. Does find a Zoe in shop. I think pausing to try and figure out if/how he can fit this in. She's a great late game unit, but until she gets there, not quite as strong. We'll just toss the Thieves Gloves on her for the time being. We've seen how much she can stall for this composition with the ultimate. We see Skew going for that Infinity Edge, as you mentioned, with the Jeweled Gauntlet to try and make that Ezreal a little bit more useful.
Oh, of course, yes, a Jeweled Lotus going with the Infinity Edge as well. That's wonderful news. I mean, currently Skew is up at the top of the lobby, so they've got time to have to find another carry. Right now, the Ezreal has proven to be an incredible investment of 2 loaded dice.
Yeah, but I was going to say, Ezreal's still dead as hell, though. There's only so much an Ezreal 3 can do. He doesn't have any synergies that particularly help him. His items are not particularly fantastic. I think if you're Skew, you have to recognize you have a ton of health to work with, but if you keep this Ezreal, you don't have any time left to work with. If you lose every round, it doesn't matter how much health you start with. We're headed towards stage 5. There's not much longer you can keep this up.
Well, at least for our players who are starting to slip down from the top of the table, they have got the comfort of knowing that both Mug Squared and Gluteus are very close to being eliminated.
Yeah.
If and when that does happen, if they do not climb back up that table, that means that your best or worst case scenario here is a 6th. We are watching a lobby that is kind of on the bubble here. So every point will count, but going 8th or 7th could easily be the game, which means you will not make day 2.
Now Gluteus' board, he has swapped in that Siphon to try and get him a little bit more power with the 6 Whispers. And I think the Pantheon's going to be the star of the show here. That ultimate gives so many stacks of Whispers that he often becomes just an unkillable monstrosity. You can see him taking down that Nyla in quick succession. And Gluteus will survive into the Treasure Dragon. Just needs more items for that Siphon, for that Pantheon to keep himself in the game as a whole, as everyone survives going into stage 5.
We're going to check back in with Mr. Level Up. Rubik did run out of money, which is a bit of a problem when you've got an incredibly powerful augment that requires you to have a lot of money, but they seem to have recovered economically as of this round. So I think we're going to start seeing Rubik having the spare liquidity to be able to push themselves up levels and get a truly obscene late game board.
Now, looking at Mug Square's board, still sticking to this Dark Flight. This is a play for 6 angle. There is no way you can get first from here because you're contesting the lobby leader on the same composition. But with a 2-star carry, with that utilization of the emblem, as you pointed out, where you don't actually need to have it on your unit, going for a 3-item Rengar, hoping to survive longer than Gluteus, longer than Marks.
Certainly, if you get the right kind of matchups and the wrong kind of positioning. I mean, to be fair, though, it's very, very hard to keep the Rengar from the door. If you can't kill him when he jumps in first off, he jumps straight to your lowest army unit, as has been pointed out before, which means you can't really protect your carry unless you put the Rengar down right away.
Now, this could be make or break here for Mug. Running up against Marks, another player at risk of elimination, but Marks much healthier HP total. So we see finally the first time this 3-item Rengar starting to actually do work on this backline.
Now we've seen the return of our good friend, who will become more than a little familiar with, Siphon and Xiaoyu. Doing a pretty good job together. We've got the more defensive setup here for the Siphon, which is a little interesting to see, but it's working relatively well. We do have Swain surviving to the end of round, which does put, it's kind of a win condition in of himself. Not quite good enough at this point, but Mug Squared, unfortunately, will be shuffled out of the way. I'm sure Anaconda is very pleased about that.
Exactly, dead too. That feels real bad. Like you said, Anaconda going to get all those Rengar back in the pool. But I do want to highlight something we saw for a second on Marks' board. We don't need to look back on it necessarily, but that's a Gnar 3.
Yeah!
So,
they were meaning about it in the patch notes, but apparently it is a thing.
Very fun, sure. Was
3
starting
items
to fall off.
Not 3.
Yeah. So this is going to be the main carry for Marks' board. I'm not sure how late into the game this is going to be remaining relevant. This is kind of an educational moment for myself and hopefully some people at home, as that Pantheon just gets absolutely melted. So I think Gnar's going to do just fine this fight.
Oh boy, yeah. I mean, it certainly seems like a very, he seems like a very good item holder, for Siphon, if that's the kind of setup you're pushing towards. And I guess in this case, if you just happen to find so many Gnars that you might actually want to stick around with it long term, I don't think we do see that, the damage isn't incredible, but it's good enough.
It's good enough, and he's tanky and has healing from the Bloodthirster, and I think that combination is what really makes it work. It's kind of a war by attrition thing, it feels like, watching these fights, because maybe the Siphon barely survives, maybe the Xiaoyu barely survives, but Gnar is the constant. He's your home base. He's where you go when you're feeling maybe a little insecure. This is sounding more like a love letter to Gnar than it is an analysis of a team composition, but I promise it's both.
I mean, I'm kind of glad, honestly, because I can't remember who I was saying to, not even been yourself, that I think up until this point, you could have been forgiven for forgetting that Gnar was even in the set.
Yeah. Super underappreciated as a unit. Now, finally getting his time in the sun as we see Rubik, a level up player, has finally hit level 9, working on a Deja composition.
And this, of course, is the fully, full power Sohm. They're not currently a Sohm 2, I believe, just a Sohm 1, but with the itemization of the gods, we'll be able to take down Rubik, who is up at level 9. Bear in mind, of course, Rubik has got the highest ceiling in the game because they can go to level 10.
I feel so bad for Sologasang in this position because when you're stuck with a 1-star carry still at stage 5, you know that you really need to roll in order to stabilize. And I think that's a fair assumption in 99% of games, but he's now starting to win rounds even with the 1-star. So he's just like donkey rolling round after round when in retrospect, he could have just sat and built econ. But you don't get the chance to do that. You don't get the chance to take that bet unless you're willing to risk it all, and Solo wants to play it safe, and I think that's a very smart decision.
Well, one thing which kind of passed by without comment before was the Zyra 3 has come in for Solo Gasang, even post-nerf. That's going to be a pretty major hitter. I believe it was just the damage that got taken down from Zyra rather than the stun duration, so any comps that are trying to run any kind of coherent straight across backline is going to be in a world of hurt.
Now, Marks, this is potentially the last round before he gets eliminated. It's going to be a Nidalee 2, just a ZZ Rock carrier, a shapeshifter bot at this point. I don't think this composition is long for this world, even despite the Scythe 2.
No, I would have loved to have seen, Nar be amazing, but I do still feel like it's the item holder kind of situation. Up against Solo Gasang, we'll see how effective that Zyra 3 ends up being. Of course, the board's getting relatively spread out, so it's not going to be an instant death onto everybody, but you can see on the backline, Solo Gasang, they've got so many different threats again, and I think maybe this is something we're going to be seeing more and more as we go along. Just so many different units that can win the rounds almost by themselves.
Yeah, I think the Zoe plus Soam combo is super important in this mage composition. It stalls for so much time for Soam to enable her to start firing off. And now we see Gluteus Maximus on a single point of health. Has not found the upgrades that he is looking for and is at very high risk of getting knocked out of this game. But what option do you have other than just rolling down and hoping?
Oh boy, I mean, as we were talking about before, at least it has come to pass that the bottom 2 places have been filled in. Again, these players pretty much on the bubble in the competition. Of course, we have got 2 more games after this to make the difference and climb back up again, but ideally you want to be going into the back half of the day semi-comfortable that you can continue to get your wins and be part of that top half.
Yeah, whoever loses here is out of the game and into round 5 at a bottom 4 placement. And it looks like Skew, finally having transitioned out of that Ezreal, is having a better time, but he'll come down to this last wave to see if he can do it. Unfortunately, Deja, not quite enough, and Skew goes down, taking a 6th place.
I mean, that's pretty amazing for Gluteus' situation, because Annie is on 3 as well. So the 4th place is very much up in the air. We've got one last item coming in. Well, I suspect one last item for Anaconda. It's not amazing to have the Hextech Gunblade, but I suspect it can be made to work. We've got a couple of assassins who don't do enough damage to make it worthwhile.
I mean, Nyla, you could put it on Swain if you really don't want the emblem, because like you've mentioned before, you still benefit from it if you don't have that slot. And Swain is one of those units who's not going to complain about more healing. That's kind of his bag, is the drain tank position. So, like you said, it could be worse, but it's really not what you're looking for from this position. And it feels bad for Annie. Started the game incredibly strong, had an incredible mid-game, but contested by Mug for most of the game, and now has been denied that chance of finding a Rengar 3, which is kind of the capstone for this composition that no longer is available.
I mean, that's one of the things that can absolutely affect your mentality as a player. As we do see another Rengar in the shop. From Annie's point of view, they absolutely did the right thing. They announced their intention immediately with an Assassin Emblem. There's only one comp they're going to be playing. So by all rights, they should have access. We'll see how we do with the Hextech Gunblade. We'll be on that Swain. So they're trying to stay alive. Gluteus Maximus is trying to do the same thing as well. Up against Zelendario from the Open Qualifier, who is looking pretty healthy in comparison to a lot of other players.
Yeah, and you can see that Pantheon running ramshackle over the backline there, going to be looking pretty strong, may be able to keep him in the game for Gluteus as that Xiaoyu just gets blown up. Pantheon looking to be a really strong carry today.
And there we go, Annie goes out in 5th. I think you're exactly right. Not being able to hit the Rengar 3 meant that ball was capped out a lot lower than it should have been by all rights. Gluteus holds on 1 HP. They're coming for Rubik, who has hit level 10.
This is going to be good for Rubik, but unfortunately, look at this board. Look how rather uncapped it is. Sure, you've got a couple of legendaries spread out, but you're sitting on a Zippy with the Thieves' Gloves. You're sitting on a Deja carry. These are not things that can by themselves get you through it. You've got the 8 guild, but you're missing damage, I think, in the later stages. But you're up against Gluteus. You might be fine.
Well, we shall see. It's certainly going to be a big round. Rubik, you can see the damage is pretty good right now, and imagine if they could get, you know, an Outshin or similar into the same kind of position, they'd be very, very happy, but they'll have to make do with what they've got. Deja is doing a pretty decent job, and also the stuff coming out at perfect timing as well. Siphon will get the chomp off, but of course, it's not the Siphon perhaps we're used to from the sets past. Will not land the second chomp, and that means Rubik stays alive at the expense of Gluteus Maximus.
And Jelendario also falling down into third in that matchup against Solo Gasong, who has finally hit the 2-star Sohm, the secret ingredient that was missing this entire game. 3-star Nyla as well on the board here for Solo Gasong. I think that's all she wrote, Peter.
All she wrote, and it was a very short story at the end. I was honestly fairly disappointed with having it being quite as one-sided as it's going to end up being.
The last second. Oh, that's brutal.
I love as well that this is what you brought us in with here with Solo Gasong, you know, king of the rerolls, has managed to successfully reroll a unit we would have never expected to get up to 3-star.
And now look at this Nyla in the backline, completely uncontested so far. The first dash not going to find a kill, but she's looking for a second onto this Deja, the only damage threat here on Rubik's team. Deja is down, Rubik to follow. Solo Gasong places first in the 4th round of the Golden Spatula Cup Day 1.
Oh boy, yeah, a really good statement of intent from